Welcome to another episode of Arbitration Life. I am Janette Brin.
And I'm Hana Doumal.
International arbitration is an increasingly popular route for companies and sovereign states seeking to solve legal disputes instead of heading to the courtroom. According to the 2021 Queen Mary survey, the 5 most preferred seats for arbitration are London, Singapore, Hong Kong, Paris, and Geneva. In the mid-2000s, the late Dr. J.S. Archibald, QC, and his colleagues came up with the idea to introduce the BVI to arbitration. And now here we are, holding our own with the best of them.
Very true indeed. Those are very exciting times, and I'm happy to be a part of it. Mm-hmm. And the BVI IAC, despite all of the challenges brought by Hurricane Irma and now the COVID-19 pandemic, is well positioned to be a hub for arbitration. We have been waiting for the opportunity to have our very special guest for today on the show to take us through the creation of the BVI IAC.
Today's guest proudly boasts that he has pursued a career that he loves. He has served as Divisional Practice Manager at Dentons, UK. There, he oversaw the energy, transport, and infrastructure, real estate, and planning dispute resolution, including international arbitration, insolvency, financial markets, and commercial disputes division. While in the UK, he also spent 8 years at Linklaters. Did I say that right?
Linklaters, yeah.
Yeah, where he served as Strategic Research Manager before later becoming promoted to the Global Business Manager. Today, he leads our awesome team here at the BVI International Arbitration Centre. Francois Lassalle became the institution's CEO in 2016. Here from the beginning, Francois can tell you everything you need to know about developing an arbitration institution.
Please welcome Monsieur Francois Lassalle.
Welcome, Francois.
Welcome to Arbitration Life.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Janette. It's a pleasure to be on Arbitration Life at last. Can't believe you made me wait 15 episodes or so to be on the show. But anyways.
We saved the very best for last.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you today. Okay, shall we start?
Yes, we shall. So let's first establish, how did you get to the British Virgin Islands? And could you please tell us a little bit about the creation of this wonderful, magnificent center known as the BVI International Arbitration Centre?
So this is a funny story, actually. So back in 2015, the board of the Arbitration Centre proceeded to embark in a global search for the CEO of the centre. And I got a call from a recruitment agency, a headhunter in London in October 2015. And it was a pretty strange call to get when it's miserable outside and you've got someone on the phone telling you, we've got a CEO role 7,000 miles away from here in the Caribbean to do something that nobody has done for the last 20 years. Would you be interested? And the automatic answer, I guess, was yes, without really fully understanding what it would mean and so on. And it's only as I went through all the rounds and I got an offer that I realized that the biggest decision was actually to make that move and to take my family and move it 5,000 miles away from London, where we had our friends, and France, where we had our family. But I'm glad I made that decision. And this is really how I got here and why. The creation of the Arbitration Centre started much before me. Back in the mid-2000s, a working group was established by the government of the BVI to identify whether or not morphing the BVI from a litigation-only jurisdiction into a dispute resolution jurisdiction inclusive of arbitration was a good idea. And the outcome of that working group is that the BVI enacted the brand new legislation in 2014 based on the ancestral model law, and became a party to the New York Convention and did all those things. And the Arbitration Act created the institution itself. And then it was just a matter of, taking what was in the legislation and making it a reality. And so when I moved to the BVI in early 2016, that was the job. You take a piece of paper and you create an arbitration center and an institution.
That is amazing. As I listen to you, I just can't help but to think history in the making, and you were part of it.
Absolutely. And Francois Lassalle, can you please tell us more about your role as the CEO of the BVI IAC?
So my role has changed, and I'll pick up where I just left. When I moved here, my role was an hybrid role between, trying to find a relationship with the BVI government that was enabling the IAC to be independent, dealing with architects and construction workers for the fit out of the center that people can see behind you. I was tasked on day 2 to open the center by Christmas, and this was April, if I remember well. And when I started to say to people, I need to open the center within the next 9 months, and no, I haven't signed a lease yet, people started laughing at me because none of them thought that anything would be feasible within a year or 2 anyway. And so that first year was really focused on construction of the center itself, but also the creation of the institution. And that goes from, coming up with a new set of arbitration rules based on the ancestral model law, to establishing the initial roster of arbitrators to be on our panel, to drafting procedures for how the center would operate, and so on and so forth. So the first year was really construction build with a startup attitude. I worked from home for 6 months, and then I ended up in a very small room with no window at the Financial Services Commission for 6 months until we finally opened the center. And so that was year 1. Year 2 was a completely different job. I wasn't talking to builders anymore. And it was more about streamlining processes and starting to sell the center, because now the BVI as a jurisdiction had an arbitration product, and it was about increasing brand awareness and creating momentum locally and regionally so that people were aware of what was available, really. And then obviously at the end of year 2, there was a hurricane. Well, there were 3 hurricanes, 2 of which damaged or significantly damaged a big portion of the BVI. And that dampened my efforts to go out there and to do the job of that of a CEO of an arbitration center for about 6 months. And then I moved back, and as the operations were stabilizing, the role evolved again into a more marketing business development role. And that's what it's been until the pandemic. And then the pandemic again threw everything up in the air. And we had to reinvent our marketing and start to marketing our remote services. So when you're asking me, can you tell us about your role as the CEO of the BVI International Arbitration Centre? I'd rather talk about roles with a big capital S at the end than a role. But it's been, outside of being a roller coaster, it's been an amazing experience, and I've learned a lot along the way.
Thank you, Francois.
So if you were not the CEO of the BVI International Arbitration Centre, had not worked in a financial information startup, law firms and banks and so on, what would you be doing?
I'd like to come up with a really cool answer. Like, I'd be the proud owner of a surf shop that's mostly closed because I'm out surfing.
You know, it's so funny you said that because I was going to say he's going to say he would have been a surfer.
but no, I think, you know, I spend most of my studies studying economics and banking and finance, and I'm a very pragmatic person. I'm a process-focused person. I may not be using the words of a very wise woman, a very orderly person, but I like order. And I think that my career would have been in economics, probably in applied research, and not necessarily working for banks, but, you know, you asking me, working for logistics firms like Merck's or UPS or DHL, and helping them refine the processes to create efficiencies and deliver better profitability would have been probably a dream job for someone like me. Or chief editor of Condé Nast and spend my life traveling and staying in amazing hotels and locations.
Yeah, that
sounds pretty good as well.
This is what I was expecting, actually. That's a good answer. Francois, what is your proudest moment at the BVI IAC?
I'm going to cheat while answering that question because it would be extremely hard for me to pick one. I was extremely proud when we opened the center and we had the soft opening before Christmas in 2016. And when people, you know, were surprised that we had achieved so much in so little time to that level of perfection. I was very proud when the BVI IAC received its first case in year one and started administering cases in year one, when other institutions had to wait a number of years in other jurisdictions. I was very proud that the center was able to accommodate government and the National Emergency Operational Center after the hurricanes to help for the recovery of the country. I was very proud when we got our first, multi-million-dollar arbitration. So, the last nearly 6 years of my life as CEO of the BVI IAC has been a long succession of proudest moments, and each new one is beating the last one, and I hope it continues. But it's been a great experience.
Thank you.
I couldn't agree with you more. So what would you say out of any difficulty you might have faced or even failures, what taught you the most in your career?
I would have to pick the hurricanes. And, this is not an interview about hurricanes, I suppose, but, a year and a half, after moving to the BVI was, pretty much destroyed. I think there was 87% damage to all buildings by Hurricane Irma, followed 2 weeks later by Hurricane Maria, 2 of the biggest hurricanes ever recorded in the Northern Atlantic. And, within 24 hours, the country that you've lived in for a year and a half just is not able to operate anymore. Houses are destroyed. Telecommunication is non-existent. People don't know if they've got anything to eat or drink for the next day. I remember the premier of the BVI telling me his house was destroyed and his entire family was calling him to say, please come and help and do something to help us because our house is destroyed. And he was in the very same position. And so, when we emerged after the hurricanes, I walked for like 2.5 hours to get to Road Town. And I passed the governor's house that was destroyed. I passed the admin building where the government sits usually, that was completely destroyed. And I expected the arbitration center to be, well, completely destroyed like everything else around me. And I got to the center and it was absolutely intact. It was, you know, the AC was working. My office was the same. And I got in there and I thought, well, there is no point continuing to set an arbitration center if I don't have a country around it. And so I went back to the street and I changed the plan. And for the following 3 to 6 months, 3 months completely and 6 months partially, the Arbitration Centre hosted the government of the BVI, the Governor's Office, the National Emergency Operational Centre, and I ended up being in meetings with the British Army and some of the decision makers in the BVI as to, you know, what we could do to help the BVI and its people to recover and get out of this emergency situation into a more recovery, redevelopment mode. And so if this job has taught me something is that, you know, you can have the best plan, but there's always something that's going to hit you when you expect it the least, and you're just going to have to adapt and do what's right. And, you know, a year and a half in this new job, I got the opportunity to do what I think was right. And it's taught me a lot, and I've learned a lot of things along the way.
Awesome.
Thank you, Francois, for sharing that. It's such an amazing story. And now, what is the most valuable lesson that you learned during your career?
People. People. A lot of managers, directors, and you name it, do not spend enough time with their people. I've witnessed it firsthand where, you know, hiring decisions are made on the fly. Direct line managers spend 5 minutes in the interview room, but they're dedicated to the HR personnel. Hiring the right people that understand what you're trying to build and trying to do is critical in any business. And I think it's often overlooked. And I'm not saying this because we are all working together, but I do hope you will agree when I'm finished with my answer, that I am a people person and I do value interacting and getting feedback from people that work with me. And I take hiring decisions very seriously as well, because I know how critical it is for the success of a business. And obviously, when you're running a firm that has thousands and thousands of people, there is an element of delegation that, you know, that is bound to happen. But I think as the leader of any size of organization, ensuring that priority is given to this is one of the most critical lessons and values that should be built into any business.
That's very true. That's a great answer.
Thank
Actually,
you,
I agree with you fully.
Yes, I ditto everything that you said. Francois, why is the Caribbean region such an up and coming hub for arbitration?
Arbitration started a long time ago, and for the best part of a century, essentially focused on North America, Europe, and from 1985 onwards on Asia through Hong Kong and Singapore. There are large parts of the world, inclusive of the Caribbean, that have been underdeveloped and underrepresented in the arbitration world for the last 100 years, namely America, the Caribbean, South America, beg your pardon, the Caribbean, Africa, and big parts of Asia. I think that there has been a realization that these jurisdictions can do as well, if not better, than some of the more traditional jurisdictions that have been involved with arbitration in a long time. And what we've seen also in the last 15 years is some of the mainstream institutions planting flags in some less sophisticated regions. So the ICC being a prime example there, where they've set up shop in various jurisdictions in Africa and Latin America and so on and so forth. And jurisdictions like the BVI, but other countries in the Caribbean, Barbados, for instance, Jamaica, realized that a lot of the disputes handled through arbitrations were going to New York or London or Hong Kong, and that it was just not necessary, and that there was the skill set and the willpower in these non-mainstream, I will call them, jurisdictions, to create the legal framework and have the necessary local and regional expertise to develop centers of excellence that would be able to handle arbitrations both locally and globally that relates to these jurisdictions. And that's what has been happening in the Caribbean. And I think that this is supported by the general rise of arbitration globally. I think I call it the arbitration pie has been growing non-stop for the last 100 years, and it will continue to grow because I'm a strong believer that arbitration is a really good dispute resolution mechanism to resolve certain types of disputes. And when it comes to commercial disputes, there are loads of scenarios where arbitration makes more sense than litigation. And I think that this trend of the growth of volume of the number of cases and the size of the cases will continue. And I'm happy that we're starting to see a diversification of the jurisdictions, both culturally and geographically.
Francois, as the CEO of the BVI IAC, what would you say is very specific to the BVI IAC compared to other arbitral institutions?
Well, the BVI is a premier financial service jurisdiction in the world. And off the back of that, there is no better jurisdiction in the world to handle offshore disputes, really. All the expertise is on island. And, I don't want to bore the audience, but we obviously have an antitrust-based legislation that is state of the art. We've got a premier arbitration center. We've got exceptional rules that we are about to update and make even better. We've got a second to none panel of arbitrators that has a lot more diversity, both in terms of gender and geography, than most arbitration panels in the world. We have a very supportive commercial court that completely understand arbitration. And then we've got opt-ins and opt-outs that you cannot find in other jurisdictions that make arbitration in the BVI a lot more flexible. And then we've got things that like ancillary legislations that really streamline the process of arbitrating in the BVI. So for instance, persons that come to the BVI to arbitrate are exempt from permit exemption, work permits. Confidentiality is another great example of something that is quite peculiar to the BVI. Court orders in support of arbitration in the BVI will be by default private. So you can maintain confidentiality and privacy even in court documents, which is not the case in a lot of other jurisdictions where those documents will need to be sealed. So all of this just really does make the BVI an exceptional dispute resolution and arbitration in particular jurisdiction. And, I talked about offshore, but we're the only arbitral jurisdiction with everything in place in the Caribbean. We also happen to be at the crossroads of the Americas. So if there is a dispute between a North American company and a South American company, there is no reason as to why they should go to Hong Kong or Paris, London in order to arbitrate. They can come to the BVI. We're pretty like less than 4 hours from home. We're on the same time zone, so they can FaceTime their kids when they're done with the hearing. And we've got all the facilities that you would expect to find in any premier arbitral center in the world.
Very true. Thank you, Francois.
Could you please share with us, Francois, how is it to live and work in the British Virgin Islands, and what do you do on weekends?
Okay, so a lot of my London friends mocked me when I moved to the BVI. They were telling me, like, you know, I would be on a permanent holidays and so on and so forth. This was, you know, this wasn't true, obviously. We do work hard, and I'm sure the two of you will agree with me on this one. I think the only difference with the BVI is because it's such a small island, usually your commute is 10-15 minute stops, and you know, you leave quite close to the ocean, and you know, you get easier access to outdoor activities. You get to spend more time with your family, and what I keep saying to my friends is, I probably work as much in the BVI as I did in London, but then you've got 2 days of weekend, and you know, I'll take a boat out and I'll go scuba diving or sport fishing, or I'll go to an outer island for lunch, or I'd take my kids snorkeling on a beautiful coral reef. And you come back in the office on the Monday and it feels like you've been on holidays for a week, when really you just spent 2 days with your family and friends, just having fun outdoors. And that really has been the experience here. You know, work hard during the week and then just, you know, enjoy the beautiful waters during weekends.
Agreed. Yes. And this beautiful place that we live in makes it so easy.
I know.
And it feels like you're back from a vacation on Monday morning, actually. So I've been telling my friends recently. So it's true. So Francois, how is it to work with Janette and Hana?
I would like to invoke the Fifth Amendment really on this question.
That's a good one.
Because if that is not a trick question, you know, what is? No, I mean, you know, I could give a really nasty answer here, like, you know, it's like herding cats. It's not. It's been a pleasure to work with the two of you. You are completely different. You bring completely different skill sets to the table, completely different personalities. But I think, you know, it's that diversity that makes my job interesting. And you know, I've loved every single interaction I've had with you, Anna, and you, Janette, to date, even when you disagree with me. But you know, it's been just great overall.
Oh, thank you, Francois. Likewise, it's been a pleasure working with you.
But I think this is a very good time to introduce someone who's been hiding behind that camera for long enough.
I agree.
There she is, the fourth member of the team. Now it's important.
And this is Miss Chantal Gray, our Senior Administrative Assistant, that you, as a user of the BVI International Arbitration Centre, will get to meet or interact with, because she handles our front office and client queries, and she's very much involved in a lot of the things that we do. So, you know, I just wanted to introduce Chantal formally to our audience.
Sounds great. Yeah, and she's also very much involved in Arbitration Life.
You can go back and hide now, Chantal.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Francois, it has indeed been a pleasure, but before we let you go, we have to settle the score on our whole Netflix competition, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
What team are you on? Will it be
How to Get Away with Murder
or Suits?
So that's a very simple answer. I've never watched Suits, but I have watched every single episode of How to Get Away with Murder, and I loved them.
We're winning. The hashtag with Mother Shore is winning.
Yes, I think so too. I think so too. Thank you so much. But I still have to mention that Francois is a dresser, so I'm surprised he hasn't watched Suits. Okay,
haven't.
I
Maybe
just
I
want to put it
should.
out there. Okay. Thank you, Francois.
It's been a pleasure, and I'll see you later.
Thank you so much for being our guest today. Thank you.
My pleasure. All right, ciao, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much, Francois, for being our guest today.
Many thanks to Francois Lassalle for taking the time out of his busy schedule to talk with us here on Arbitration Life.
For more Arbitration Life, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and to follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and
Facebook.
at Arbitration Life.
All right.